From the City of Angels near the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Noory. Welcome to Coast AM. Boy, do we have a program for you tonight. Up next, we're going to talk about environmental toxins. The work is called Poison. Alan Bell joins us on Coast to Coast. We'll talk about his story, his life, next on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast. We've got a very important couple hours for you. Perhaps you don't feel well these days, or a member of your family just doesn't feel well, and you just don't know what's happening. It could be an environmental issue, toxins in the environment. Alan Bell is an attorney who prosecuted drug and homicide cases for the state of Florida before developing multiple chemical sensitivity. He is now the founder of the Environmental Health Foundation, which advocates for victims of environmental injury. Here he is on Coast to Coast with his work, Poisoned. What a dramatic career change for you, Alan. My gosh.
Glad to be here, George. I'm very happy to be. Yes, it was quite a transformation, what happened in my life.
You moved, you changed careers. You did just about everything after this tragedy hit.
Well, you know, when you're dealt with a deck of cards, it's how you deal with them. And with me, back in the 1980s, I was living the real Miami vice. I was going after Colombian cartel drug rings and the mob and hanging out of helicopters and wearing 357 shoulder holsters. And it was snowing cocaine in Miami at that time in the 1980s. And basically living the American dream. You know, I had a new baby girl and, you know, a new house, a new car. I was going on ski vacations and I was on track to run for a United States Senate seat, and it was about that time that my law office moved into a brand new building. And it was a very exciting time in my life, George, because it was just amazing. It was one of these new smart buildings with talking elevators and new carpeting and
smell of fresh paint, right?
Oh, yeah. You know, there's nothing like the smell of a new car. It smells so good.
That's right.
Right? And that's the way the office was. I was overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, looking out my window, leaning back in my chair, thinking to myself, wow, I finally made it.
Little did you know.
Little did I know that shortly after I moved in, I developed a set of symptoms. My throat started scratching me, my lungs started burning, my eyes started burning. I began getting fatigued. Everything started hurting me, just like I had a really bad flu.
Were coworkers, did they have the same symptoms, or were you alone on this?
Well, at that point, I thought I was alone. And when you hear the rest of the story, you'll see I'm basically going to tell you the story through my eyes.
Sure.
There's a lot of twists and turns in this thing.
This becomes a big puzzle, doesn't it? That the pieces all fall together.
It was basically a medical mystery. So I began going from doctor to doctor, basically all over the United States. I went to Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic and University of Miami and Harvard University.
How old were you, Alan, when this was happening?
I was in my, early 30s.
So, young guy.
I was a young guy. I was 6'2", 195 pounds. Athletic, just, you know.
Great family life?
You know, it's the typical American family. I mean, the American dream.
Okay, so you are going now to clinic to medical institution, and what are they telling you?
Well, they're taking all types of tests, and, well, it's not this, and it's not that. And, you know, actually, one of the doctors said, listen to me at Mayo Clinic. He says, I'm going to do a battery of tests. But before we do that, I want to take a psychological profile on you. And I knew exactly what he was thinking, right?
Yeah.
Well, he says if you were a hysterical housewife, I would think that it was in your head. But since you're this white male, then we really believe there's something wrong with you. I mean, can you imagine the inequity and that type of?
Oh my God, it's sad.
It's very sad. Well, I went through all the tests all over the place. I went all over the United States. And finally, I was in Denver, Colorado.
Were you poked and prodded all along the way?
Poked, prodded, Every opening in my body was invaded.
Oh,
every
my God.
X-ray, every test that you could possibly imagine. I've visited over 200 doctors, and my medical bills were over $1 million.
Jeez. Tell me you had insurance.
I had great insurance. Thank
Good.
God for that.
Good. All right. So you end up in Denver. What happens there?
I'm in Denver. There was a physician by the name of Dr. Kirkpatrick. He was one of their prized physicians. They got him from the National Institutes of Health. He sat me down in the chair with a very grim face, and he looked at me and he said, Mr. Bell, these blood tests indicate that you were somehow poisoned.
Whoa.
And I looked at him and said, what?
Now, the first thing you think of is somebody poisoned you directly, right? You think of that.
Yes, and the conversation ensued where he asked me, do you know of anybody that would want to poison you?
There you go.
And I sort of chuckled and said, yeah, take a ticket and wait online.
Exactly. You put a lot of people in prison.
Well, kingpins from the mafia, kingpins from the Colombian cartel drug rings, from South America, who knows who it could have been? So he said, that's what it is. We're going to do some more specific tests, but in the meantime, why don't you go home and rest and come back after we do another round of tests.
And home is Florida at this time still, right?
Home is South Florida,
okay.
Correct. That's the epicenter of where all the cocaine was coming through in the United States at that time.
All right.
And let me give you a little backdrop with what South Florida was like at that time. Of all the murder rates in the world back then, the United States had the highest per capita murder. And of all the states, Florida was the highest.
That was it.
And of all the cities in Florida, ground zero is where I was. There were bodies floating in the Miami River every day from murder.
My God.
And I was in the center of this. When they were filming Miami Vice, and Don Johnson was on Miami Beach filming it, I was in the courthouse doing the thing that they were filming.
Yeah, in real life.
In real life. Actually, I was a consultant on their show for a few of their episodes. They wanted to get it right. So I go back to South Florida, and the first thing I do is I sit down with one of my investigators, and I said, look, they said I've been poisoned. Find out who did it.
You told the investigator to do this.
That's what I did.
All right.
So my investigators went out.
Now, and they still at this point have not told you what the poison was, right?
They weren't sure. It was sort of like, it was like a fingerprint that was consistent with poisoning, but they couldn't identify the specific element.
I would have thought arsenic or something like that.
Well, they have all kinds of tricks in that world, let me tell you. So the investigator starts looking at every aspect of my life. They visit the gymnasiums that I worked out at, the movie theaters that I went to, the restaurants that I frequented, the people, the friends that I associated with. And finally, their last stop was the office that I worked in. And they began talking to different workers in that building.
Mm-hmm.
They went floor to floor.
The new building.
The new building that I was in. And wouldn't you know it, George, that they uncovered dozens and dozens and dozens of other people that were falling ill as well.
Aha. And this is where the puzzle begins to shape up like a picture.
Right. So I'm thinking to myself, this doesn't make sense. By that time, I had been referred to an environmental specialist about a half-hour drive from where I lived in South Florida.
Okay.
And I went to him, and I gave him this whole book of papers and test results, and I sat down and I told him my history, and he said, look, I'm not interested in looking at all these tests. You've been tested enough. I know what's wrong with you. I said, what's that? He said, the building that you're working in is a sick building, and you have what's called sick building syndrome.
Which is what?
Which is, sick building syndrome is where when you are exposed to different environmental toxins and it damages your immune system and your nervous system.
Jeez. And these toxins could be in the paint, in the walls, everywhere, I guess, right?
Everywhere. And when you get chemicals from new carpeting and you mix it with chemicals from the new paint and the particle board and the furniture and the plastics that are outgassing on the brand new computer screens, it develops a whole slew of new chemicals. And we're breathing all of this stuff in.
Number of airline employees, flight attendants for an airline, about 6-7 months ago, all broke out in rashes from the uniforms that they gave them because of the chemicals and the dye that were in the uniforms. So this stuff must have been all over that building. Did they get specific, Alan? Did they pinpoint exactly what it was?
Back in the 1980s, George, they did not have the technology to pinpoint it like they do now. So the answer is no. They were never able to identify what it was. But I can tell you this, that there was a judge's daughter who was an attorney that was working in the building. She died.
Oh, my God. How long did you have to be exposed in there for the symptoms to start popping up?
That's a very good question. I would say within a few weeks.
Jeez, not long at all. So that's almost every employee there.
That's right. And we're talking about the tallest building in Broward County, Florida.
Brand new.
Brand new. Brand new. I mean, it was a megaplex. It had movie theaters. It had hotel. It had restaurants. It had nightclubs. It had everything.
Ah. If somebody would frequent the building to go to a nightclub, let's say once a week, would they eventually come down with some of these symptoms?
It's a good question. The answer is it depends on each individual's genes, their biochemical fingerprint. Some people are more resistant to chemical exposure than others. Everybody has enzymes in their bodies that neutralize chemicals when we're exposed to them. And the variance from one person to another in terms of their enzymatic capacity could be 1,000-fold.
Gosh, hold on for a second, Alan. We're going to take a quick break and talk more about your work, Poisoned, because it could happen anywhere. I'm George Noory. We'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. All right, welcome back to Coast. Alan Bell with us. We're talking about his work, Poisoned. Let me read the rest of it. How a crime-busting prosecutor turned his medical mystery into a crusade for environmental victims. This all started when he moved into a building down in Miami, brand new, spanking building, and all of a sudden he started getting sick. Let's go through some more of those symptoms, Alan. What happened to you?
Well, ultimately, the symptoms got more and more severe, where I started developing seizures. And I became sensitive to virtually every chemical in the environment. When I was exposed to perfumes, colognes, hairsprays, newsprints, automobiles exhaust, I would go into grand mal seizures. So the doctors told me that I needed to move into the middle of the Arizona desert, away from everything and everyone, or if I didn't, that I would die from the seizures caused by the exposures.
Oh my God.
So they found a small little environmental bubble, an 800-square-foot bubble, in the middle of the Arizona desert. And that's where I went with my little girl and my wife at the time. By that time, I had gone down to 145 pounds. I was in a wheelchair, tethered to an oxygen tank.
Unbelievable.
That's right. That's what happened. And my wife couldn't handle the situation, and she took off, and it was just me and my daughter, basically, to survive on our own.
Jeez. Now, when you started getting sick, were you ingesting this, breathing it, touching it? How does it enter your body?
It's a very good question. And it enters your body through, there's different forms of environmental exposure. It's either what you eat, what you breathe, what you touch, or what you drink. In my instance, it was what I was breathing. See, these objects inside buildings outgas volatile organic compounds. They're microscopic particles or compounds that are in the air that you breathe. And it goes into your lungs. It disseminates into your bloodstream, and it goes through every organ in your body.
Now, these are chemicals, unlike materials of asbestos, for example.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay.
That's correct. These are chemicals. Asbestos is a physical, it's actually a tangible particle that lodges
That's right.
in your lungs.
Little fibers and things
Exactly.
like that.
They're fibers. But in this instance, there's chemicals. And the thing is 75 million Americans become ill each year because of the buildings that we work in. And that's according to the Environmental Protection Agency.
What about even our houses?
That's right. Our houses, too. Listen, more people get sick and die from environmental exposure found in our homes, our schools, our workplaces, and our neighborhoods.
And you wouldn't even know it.
You wouldn't
That's
even
the
know
problem.
it because the cause and effect remain elusive.
You know, if you get food poisoning, generally you think, gosh, I had that thing last night from that restaurant. You just about know what happened and where. With this, you have no idea what's happening to yourself.
That's right. And the cause remains elusive, and it's cumulative. And it's cofactors, because you could be exposed to something in your home in 2005, and you could be exposed to something in your office in 2010, and that could be the tipping point that puts you over the edge.
This stuff could be in every office building in the world.
That's right. And 1 out of every 6 office buildings in the United States, according to our own federal government, is sick. Now, here's the real scary part of this, George, okay? If someone gets a virus or they get Lyme disease, like your doctor was
right.
talking about earlier in this show, that only affects you as an individual. But with this chemical exposure in your home, your school,
it's everybody who's exposed to it.
Well, it's not only everybody's exposed to it, but let's say you're in a sick building right now, okay?
All right.
And you're breathing in toxins from a new carpeting that's right on your feet, okay? Below your feet.
Yeah.
That's damaging your DNA. And your DNA becomes damaged, and it's passed on to your kids and your grandkids. And this isn't voodoo stuff. This is science.
So this is genetic altering stuff.
It's genetic alteration. And there's a new area of medicine called epigenetics.
Yep.
And that's the intersection of environment and your genes. Your genes become altered because of the environment that you're exposed to.
Now, tell me that they were able to pinpoint exactly the chemical that was doing you in, or was it everything?
It was everything. It was a toxic soup, and they were mixed together, and nobody ever really realized what it was. But I could tell you this.
Have you found out at this point?
Have not found out at this point. They'll never know, because the chemicals that were in the building when they were new, they're gone. They're gone. They're like a stealth bomber that's dropped its bomb, and they're gone.
You mean the building basically is clean now?
Yes, and I'll tell you what I did. I went back to South Florida, and I went into that building decades later, and I was fine.
Why does it leave? I mean, how does it leave?
It's just like when you buy a new car.
Is it age?
It's age. When you buy a new car, it smells new, right?
All right, and then it goes away.
And that new smell is toxic. When the new smell goes away, the toxicity goes away.
Huh.
It's a marker. It's a sign. That's what it is. What you're smelling, that smell that smells good, is toxic to the human body.
All right, so we know then that you can rule out that it was in the pipes that you were drinking the water from and things like that. This was more whatever they used. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, in terms of in manufacturing and building materials, what would they use to create this toxicity?
Well, most furniture is made out of particle board. Particle board is mostly glue and formaldehyde.
Ah, okay. Formaldehyde, which they put in dead people.
That's right. Plastics in new computers have PVCs in them, and those are outgassing into the environment. Paints have volatile organic compounds that people are breathing, and the list goes on and on and on. And, it sounds like doom and gloom. It sounds like we're all, there's no hope. But as I tell you the rest of my story, there's a silver lining at the end of it.
Oh, that's great. Now, tell me about this bubble you lived in.
Well, when I got into the bubble, it was 800 square feet. It was made out of brick, glass, and steel.
And it was a round bubble?
Well, actually, it was rectangle. It was only 800 square feet.
But you were kind of like hermetically sealed in
I
this
was
thing.
sealed in this thing with airlocks. It had air filtration. If anybody walked into the bubble, they had to decontaminate, or I would go into grand mal seizures.
Jeez.
I never left the bubble.
Was this a medical place, or did you buy it, or what was it?
Ironically, there's support groups for people that have become sensitized, and actually 15% of the American population has become sensitized to chemicals to one degree or another. So through a support group, I was able to find this home from this old lady that died in it that had the same illness. So we bought it. And in 50 miles in all directions, you saw nothing. No cars, no stores, no lights, no roads, no people.
I would have been bored out of my mind, Alan. I hope you had a radio and listened to our show, huh?
Well, I was too sick to be bored. And when I was left alone with my daughter, I fought to stay alive so she would not become an orphan. So the only contact I had to the outside world was my telephone.
And was your daughter born before or after you got this disease?
She was born right before. Thank
right
God
before.
for that.
So okay. You didn't pass it on.
Exactly.
All right.
Now, when you say disease, the more accurate term is injury.
Yeah, okay. I can see that. I can see that.
Because more people get sick and die from environmental exposure than all those afflicted with AIDS, automobile accidents, war, and crime combined. It is the silent epidemic of the 21st century. So here I am in this bubble, trying to fight to stay alive so my daughter would not become an orphan. And I used that telephone as my connection to the outside world. And I started off by talking to local doctors, and then I went up to the food chain until I ran up to the finest scientists in the world, from the EPA to the Centers for Disease Control to the National Institutes of Health and Harvard and Yale. And I had an aha moment where they said to me, Alan, what happened to you is just the tip of the iceberg. Environmental injury comes in all forms, they told me. It comes in cancer, autoimmune disease, Parkinson's, scleroderma, and the list goes on and on and on. So with this aha moment, I wanted to do something. And I started this little charity from inside the bubble called the Environmental Health Foundation. And with that telephone, I got the top scientists on the planet behind my cause. I got Al Gore, who was vice president at the time, to support it. And Gene Cernan, who was the commander of Apollo 17.
That's right.
The last man to walk on the moon, who died recently.
Yeah.
What a fine man.
He was a wonderful guy.
Wonderful guy. And he supported this.
You even got the little clip from Robert Kennedy Jr., who's been on our program, and he's a very tough advocate for, watching vaccines and things like that.
Absolutely. I helped Bobby on some of his cases, and that's how I got to know him, and that's why he endorsed the book, along with Alan Dershowitz, who I've worked on some cases with, who has also endorsed the book. But so here I am, and I put together this summit, and the venue where we had it at was the Biosphere 2. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I have not.
It's actually a large bubble in the middle of the desert, and it was co-created by Columbia Medical School and NASA, the federal government, and they put astronauts that were training to see if they could live in a confined environment where they could eat and sleep and grow their own food and make their own water in preparation for the trip to Mars.
They probably did the movie The Martian there, I would think.
They might have.
Yeah.
They might have. It looked very similar. But we had this summit at the Biosphere 2, and we had all the top scientists there, and the goal is to find out what we could do to beat this environmentally related disease. And I could not appear because I was stuck inside this bubble. But my young daughter, Ashley, went on my behalf as my proxy. And she was walking among these top scientists, this little redheaded girl, and she walked up to one of the scientists, I've been told, because I wasn't there, and she pulled on his white lab coat and said, "Excuse me, doctor, I don't understand. All you top scientists are here trying to find this out and help millions of people. Why can't you help my daddy?"
Oh, heartbreaking.
Well, wouldn't you know it, he wrote down the name and phone number of a physician and said, "Here, honey, take this to your dad. I think he could help him."
Aha.
She came back with the paper and she says, "Here, Dad, call this guy up. He's going to help you."
Give it a try.
And I'm thinking, yeah, right. She didn't know I'd been to hundreds of doctors. And
That's right.
my prognosis was I was incurable, and my life expectancy would have been maybe 45 years at the most. Okay? So long story short, we went to this doctor. It was a new anti-seizure medicine. It worked. It got me out of the bubble, and I jumped back into the legal arena. Except this time, instead of fighting one crime at a time, I went after what I believed was the ultimate crime, and it's the crime against humanity, which humanity is committing against itself. And it's almost like we have created this Frankenstein. And what I've done is I am handing down an indictment, okay, against the chemical industry and what they are doing to our people.
Do you have even a guess, Alan, what chemical might have contributed to your situation, your injury?
If you want to ask me my guess, I would say formaldehyde.
Okay.
Which is common. It's very common.
It's a common chemical used in building materials.
Absolutely. And the thing is the United States has become a garbage dump. There's no regulations whatsoever. All these toxic building materials and supplies and children's toys and clothing are being imported from Mexico and China and India and Vietnam, and there's no regulation on this stuff. And our people are the experimental animals. You know, since 1950, 85,000 chemicals have been introduced into our environment.
Gosh. And when they build these buildings, Alan, they don't air them out. They're all sealed up. Those glass, walls and windows that they put in, they don't open up like you would at your house.
Well, in the 1980s, that is correct. And in that building that I was in, there was no ventilation.
None.
We were recirculating the old air. However, we've learned since then. And now when you see these sealed-in buildings and the windows don't open, don't get so scared because they have regulations now where you have to bring in 10% fresh air through the air.
That's good. What about airlines and this recycled air when you're in a plane?
Absolutely. Well, I had a stewardess call me up today, and I get people from all over the country call me up, and it's sad to hear their stories. I had a flight attendant call me up today, American Airlines. She was poisoned in the airplane, and she was explaining to me how they just recirculate the old air.
Yes, they do.
My daughter Ashley turned out to be a flight attendant for United Airlines.
Huh.
And she goes in the airplanes, and she gets sick from the air.
So many people do.
Absolutely.
They get on a plane, they're healthy, they get off it, and they don't feel well anymore.
Absolutely. But the key to this whole thing, George, is prevention. Because the good news is if you modify your lifestyle, you can minimize your risk and prevent this from happening to you and your family. You could protect yourself and your family.
And I hold my breath for the entire flight anyway, so I'm okay that way. Gosh, but what an unbelievable. And how do you feel right now? Are you back to 100%?
No, I'm not back to 100%. I probably never will be. I'm on a very strict regimented protocol. I watch where I go. I watch what I do. I watch what I eat. And I work out all the time. If you'd look at me, you would never think there was anything wrong with me. I've gained all my weight back.
Good.
But I'm on this mission to alert other people about all of these hidden toxins that we're being exposed to.
Let's talk more about the mission you're on. The book is called Poisoned. We've got a final hour to go with Alan Bell. We're going to take phone calls, stories, and more questions about this situation. Geez, who would think about it? You go into a nice brand new building, and it just about kills you. We're going to take your calls this hour with Alan Bell, author of Poisoned, an incredible story of how he got injured by his environmental toxins, how so many other people are as well. So we'll be back with him in a moment and you on Coast to Coast AM. We are back with Alan Bell, and we're going to get to your calls as well. So as you continue to get better, Alan, and then educate more and more people with your organization, what's the reaction been from people? Are they in favor of fighting this, or do they even care?
Fighting what? What's happening with the chemical industry?
Yes.
My message is not about closing smokestacks or standing on picket lines or lobbying in Congress. My message is basically to put this back into the hands of the people. My book reveals why our government has allowed this to happen and why the medical profession has been unable to stop this. And because we can't rely upon our government to protect us, and we can't rely upon the chemical industry to do the right thing, and we can't rely upon doctors to cure us, we need to protect ourselves and our families to prevent this from happening to us. And my book shows you how to do that.
Well, and you've done a great job doing it, too. And where do you get the book? I assume Amazon has it. How about the other stores?
Right. You can go to Amazon. The best thing is just go to the website, which is alanbell.me, ALANBELL.me, M-E, and you could download a free chapter and begin reading without even having to pay anything. And if you like what you read, you could order the book right off of my website.
Now, you're in California.
I'm in California, about an hour from you, George.
All right. You're not in the bubble anymore.
I'm not in the bubble. I'm overlooking the Pacific Ocean as we speak.
Now, did you do anything different to the place you're in?
Interesting question. This house was built from the ground up. It's 5,000 square feet. It's right on the Pacific Ocean. It's all environmentally safe. I've got heat in the floors. I've got filtration for the air. I've got filtration for the water. I've got photovoltaic panels on the roof where it's taking in sun and converting it to energy and using it as electricity. It's a technological marvel when it comes to environmentally safe.
Mold toxicity is a bad thing. I hear a lot of people who buy houses and all of a sudden they've got to tear the walls down.
Ed McMahon got sick from the mold. Aaron Brockovich got sick from the mold. Suzanne Summers' husband, Alan, got sick from the mold. And I actually handled a mold case in Bakersfield, California. I represented 168 people that got sick from mold in the apartment complex.
Jeez.
It ended up on the CBS Early Show on national television, and there was a young child that died from the mold exposure and many other kids that were hospitalized from it. It's an insidious thing.
Now, is there anybody you can blame for mold exposure?
Absolutely. In that particular case, we sued the owner of the apartment complex. We sued the management of the apartment complex. And it ended up being a huge settlement. But, you can't bring these people back. There's people that died from that.
You can't.
People do die from mold exposure.
Well, you were talking about the young woman who died in the building in Miami. How bad did some of those other cases get, and what's happening to them today?
Who knows? Because I was whisked away to the other side of the country and sentenced to a life sentence inside a bubble 3,000 miles away. I have no idea what happened to anybody else.
Were you bored in that bubble?
Absolutely not. Just imagine being in absolute agony and pain, tethered to an oxygen tank, sitting in a wheelchair. You just feel that your body's imploding. It was a horrible, horrible existence. But I fought back because when I looked into my little girl's eyes, I knew that if I didn't make it, she would become an orphan.
So I would assume the thought of doing yourself in never crossed your mind?
Well, yes, it did every single day. Every day. But, when you have a responsibility to other human beings, you've got to just keep fighting. You've got to just keep fighting and fighting and fighting. And ultimately, I was lucky. I got out of this. I can't tell you how many thousands of other cases, thousands of people that I've met across the country, Gulf War veterans, firefighters, Vietnam veterans, people that are working on assembly lines at Boeing Airlines being exposed to chemicals like that. And these people didn't get second chances. So I made a promise to myself, if I ever had a second chance, I was going to try and make a difference. Now, remember Howard Hughes? Howard Hughes.
Oh, my God. Yeah, he was just, he had phobias with everything.
Well, they thought it was phobias at the time. But fast forward yourself decades later, and they're beginning to think that he had this. They were beginning to think that he had this environmental illness where he became sensitized to everything, and he locked himself into a hotel room and closed the drapes, and because the sunlight bothered him. And think about what he was doing. He built the Spruce Goose.
Yeah.
The Spruce Goose. He lived in that thing. He slept in that. That was his baby. And the most toxic chemicals you could possibly imagine were inside that plane with him that he was living in.
Because that was made out of wood, wasn't it?
It was made out of wood and all kinds of other chemicals. I mean, even the preservatives on the woods and the sealers that you have to use to make it waterproof, highly toxic.
In the building in Miami, I'm sure there were some who did not get this injury. How come? Again,
it depends on everybody's biochemical fingerprint, and that is a very smart question. And I'm going to bring it back to you with this scenario. Let's say there's a husband that smokes 3 packs a day, cigarettes, and his wife doesn't smoke at all, but she ends up getting lung cancer from the secondhand smoke.
That's right.
And nothing happens to the husband. Why? Why is that? Because everybody's chemistry and genetics are different. The wife's genetics were much weaker than the husband's, so she ended up getting lung cancer. Now, I could tell you this, if you get 10 people and you gas them in the room with toxic chemicals, over time you will see that a subpopulation of those 10 people would come down with a variety of different diseases depending on each individual's biochemical fingerprint. Look, I worked for Janet Reno, who later became the Attorney General of the United States.
Oh, that's another show all by itself, huh?
Well, she ended up getting Parkinson's because of the drinking water that she was drinking in her house. Okay?
And who would know that, she didn't.
Who would know that at that time? But she had a sister, and I still remain friends with her sister. Her name is Maggie Herchella. They were drinking the same water. Maggie ended up getting what I got, the chemical sensitivity. Janet ended up getting Parkinson's and died from the same chemical exposure.
It's everywhere, isn't it, Alan?
It is, and nobody is immune. Everybody's at risk. It doesn't matter if you're black or you're white or you're Jewish or Muslim or Christian. It doesn't matter. Rich or poor, we're all at risk.
Let's take some calls here for you. They lined up for you. We go to Robert in Ironwood, Michigan to get things started. Go ahead, Robert.
Hey, George. How you doing?
Good, Rob. Thank you.
I've been listening to you guys since Art Bell, long time ago.
And I almost thought Alan might have been his brother, but they're not related.
No, I don't think so. But I was really mad because I'm diagnosed with 5 different autoimmune diseases.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, whatever.
What do you think it was, environment for you?
No, it's genetic. I was going to ask him, was he diagnosed, was he tested for genetic autoimmune disorders?
All right.
Okay, here's my answer. Robert, all human disease and premature death are caused by only 2 factors. Number 1, the genes that you're born with, and number 2, the environment that you're exposed to. An autoimmune disease simply means that your own immune system has turned against your own tissues in your body, and your immune system is now attacking the tissues in your body. Depending upon the tissues in your body that it's attacking, that's the medical profession gives it different names. So if your immune system attacks your pancreas, you get what's diagnosed as diabetes. If your immune system attacks your connective tissues, you get what's known as fibromyalgia. And the list goes on and on and on. But it's usually an environmental insult that triggers the immune system to become reactive and start attacking its own tissues.
And when it attacks, it's almost impossible to stop.
That's correct.
Alan Bell with us. His book is called Poison. Let's go next to Teresa in Grants Pass, Oregon. Welcome to the show. Hi, Teresa.
Hi, George and Alan. This is Teresa.
Hey.
I'm so grateful to be able to talk with you.
Hi, Teresa.
Hi.
I'm happy to talk to you.
Well, I think I could be a poster child for what you're talking about.
Uh-oh.
And I've gone through, it's just been unbelievable. You know, I worked at the university for 20 years. I was outgoing. I was a musician. And now I stay in the house all the time, basically with the blinds drawn. I keep the doors and windows shut. If I go out, I have to come home and wash my clothes. I called and I talked with McKay Jenkins when he was on, George, and talked a little bit with him. But I really want to learn more about this because I'm kind of in the beginning stages of figuring out what to do. And I guess my questions are about, for me, I have kind of Parkinson's symptoms, especially when I get exposed to laundry products and stuff. And also I get emotional outbursts if I'm around, especially laundry soap perfume. It just brings up instant rage. And I don't know if you've heard of people having that or not, but...
Yes, Teresa, that's what I had.
Oh.
And when I hear you telling me about the drapes being drawn, the first image I get to my mind, George, is what we were talking about earlier with Howard Hughes. He drew the drapes too, and he stayed locked into his house. But these symptoms that you're describing is what's known as multiple chemical sensitivity. Google it. You'll read about it. There's a whole group of doctors that specialize in treating that ailment, and they're called the American Academy of Environmental Medicine. So look up one of the doctors that are in your neck of the woods and go see him, because those are the symptoms that you're describing. My question to you is was there something that changed in your life at the time you developed these symptoms? Did you move into a new house? Did you move into a new job? Anything like that? Any new buildings? Any new places?
Yes, I think so. And what I didn't realize until I heard you talking tonight was, I didn't think about this, but I worked in the admissions office at the university, and they were doing renovations when I changed departments and moved into that department. And when we moved into the renovated building, there was new paint, new carpet, new building.
There it is. There it is, George.
And see, I thought it was the smart meters. Later, looking back on it, I'd been exposed to smart meters at about the same time, and so I think I may have gotten a double whammy.
You might have.
Well, what she's talking about with smart meters is they have these new kind of meters that give off radiation. But you can buy little gauges. You can go on the internet and find and actually measure radiation, electromagnetic frequencies coming into your house or coming into where those smart meters are. And you could measure whether you could eliminate that with a meter. You could say either it's coming in or it's not coming in. But it's a classic case, from what I could see, of the renovation and then the onset of these symptoms.
Alan, of 10 people that get sick, how many do you think are getting sick because of some of the things we've talked about tonight?
Out of 10 people?
Yeah.
Well, let me give you some statistics.
All right.
You know, I'm not a doctor, but I could tell you one thing. I have close relationships with the top scientists on the planet, and any statistics that I give you are not Alan's statistics. They're either the United States government or university-based science like Harvard and Yale. So with that being said, let me throw some of these statistics at you, George.
You got it.
1 out of every 2, this is the American Cancer Society that's saying this, 1 out of every 2 males are going to get cancer in their lifetime. 1 out of every 3 women are going to get cancer in their lifetime. 1 out of every 2 Americans are living with a chronic disease right now, 50% of us. And 1 out of every 4 children live with a chronic disease, and that rises on and on and on. And you know what the number one cause of death is for children? Cancer.
Cancer, yeah.
Now, what about cancer? What are the causes of cancer? Okay? Cancer, according to the National Institutes of Health, our own federal government, says that 7 out of every 10 cases of cancer is caused by environmental exposure. Can you imagine that?
7 out of 70%.
70%. Our own government is telling us this.
Astronomical.
The Centers for Disease Control says asthma's doubled in the last 20 years. Harvard says that 1 out of every 20 city deaths are caused by outdoor air pollution.
Are there companies that you can hire, Alan, to bring them into your house and say, check it out?
Yes, there are. They're called industrial hygienists. And what they do is you have to make sure that they're certified.
Right.
Because a lot of them are masquerade as imposters.
They trick you.
They trick you. There's no regulation, and they basically give you worthless tests. But if they're certified industrial hygienists, okay, they go in there with meters, they take swabs off of surfaces in your house, they check your air, they could tell you if you have mold, if you have radon gas, if you have lead, they could even test for formaldehyde as well.
And where does radon gas come from?
Very interesting question. Do you remember Superman?
I sure do.
Reeve?
Kryptonite, right?
Right. Well, shortly after he died, his wife died. Remember?
Uh-huh.
Lung cancer. You know how she got the lung cancer? Radon. This is what radon is. It is a naturally occurring radioactive isotope that's in the ground. Okay?
It's a gas, isn't it?
Well, it's an isotope that outgasses a gas called radon. And if you have cracks in your basement, that radon will migrate into your basement and into your living space, and you could actually measure this. You could buy a test kit. My book tells you where to buy the test kit. You can actually, my book actually shows you where you can get test kits for all of these things. And you can measure these things yourself. You don't even need to hire a certified industrial hygienist if you don't have a big budget. You can do that yourself, and these test kits are not that expensive. But radon gas is the second leading cause of lung cancer in the United States. And the way you can eliminate it is just what you said earlier in the show. You open up your windows and you ventilate your house at least once a day, so any trapped gases from your furniture, your carpeting, or from radon or lead is diluted by the outside air.
That's brilliant. What great information. We're going to come back in just a moment here on Coast to Coast AM and take some final phone calls. Alan Bell with us. His book is called Poisoned. Hey, I got to tell you, everybody should have this book to read it and protect yourself and get some kits. I'm going to pick up some kits. I think it's probably well worth the investment. His website is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. And, of course, don't forget, you can always email me at george@coasttocoastam.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and we shall be back with more of your calls on Coast to Coast AM. Next hour, Neil Donald Walsh joins us, Conversations with God, book number 4, Awaken the Species. And you've heard all about him. So we'll be back in a moment with final calls in just a moment with Alan Bell. Poisoned is the book on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. George Norrie with you. Alan Bell with us. Final phone calls and questions as well. You do a great service for people, Alan. You've helped a lot of people. Can you tell me or relay a story that has come your way on some kind of toxicity issue?
Oh my gosh, they're all over the place. One of the cases that I had, it's in the book. He was a head coach, football coach of Holy Cross College, and he was actually voted Coach of the Year in a AA NCAA division. And they were resurfacing the gymnasium floor where his office was located, and they didn't tell him to get out, and he was breathing the air when they were resurfacing the wood floor. And suddenly he began throwing up and got sick. Well, the next morning he came down with a set of symptoms where he became sensitive to chemicals. And ultimately, the disease progressed to the point where he ended up in a wheelchair, and he began coaching his football team from the sidelines in his wheelchair. And actually, ESPN did a heartwarming special on him doing this. And ultimately, they contacted me, him and his wife, who was a registered nurse, and no doctors could help him. They didn't know what was wrong with him. They didn't know what caused it, although they insisted to the doctors that it had to have been what he was exposed to. The doctors just shrugged their shoulders and just didn't get it. They didn't buy it because the average doctor's training in environmental medicine is only 6 hours of training throughout the entire course of medical school. So ultimately, I sent him to some really good specialists at Boston University and at Harvard, and I used a specialist at Duke University. And what we determined is that the isocyanates that were contained in the sealers in this wood floor made him sick and damaged his nervous system. And the disease progressed to the point where he developed ALS and he died. Oh. So we sued the manufacturer of the chemicals and the school for subjecting him to this. And it was the first case in the history of the United States where we were able to prove in court that the onset of ALS was triggered by his chemical exposure.
Do these go to a full jury or do they get settled?
Well, in this particular case, the insurance company and manufacturer did not want a jury to hear this because they would have gotten a huge judgment against them. So as soon as we were able to prove in court, it was in federal court, the link between the two through our scientists. And the scientist that testified in this case was Marcia Ratner, a PhD.
Well, and the company knew, didn't they? They knew.
Of course they knew. And this is, listen, as an attorney, okay, I know how to prove a case. I know how to build a case. And in that particular case, we showed the cause and the effect that the exposure to those toxins caused the onset of ALS. So most of these chemical companies, and this is a whole nother conversation, but the federal government and chemical companies, they have a real cozy, symbiotic, collusive relationship. And there's reasons why this is allowed to go on. It's not just a fluke why these chemicals can continue to come across the borders.
Who benefits?
And who benefits is, I'll give you a clue. Follow the money.
That's right.
Follow the money. That's what they teach you as a prosecutor.
Easiest roadmap, isn't it?
That's right. You follow the money. And when the chemical industry lobbies Congress, to dysregulate these kinds of chemicals and allow them to run rampant in this country, and the chemical companies largely own the pharmaceutical companies. Now, the pharmaceutical companies, they determine, or they're very influential in determining the curriculum in medical schools. So do you think the chemical companies want to teach doctors that the chemicals that they're producing are making people sick? Of course not. Of course not. They wouldn't want to do that. So you've got this whole symbiotic relationship where the medical profession, the federal government, and the chemical industry are all keeping this status quo. And the people that are getting hurt are you and me.
I remember the horrible episode in Bhopal in India.
Absolutely.
Oh, my God. Dow Chemical, wasn't it?
At Dow Chemical.
Next up, let's go to the phones again. Joe in Long Island, New York, east of the Rockies. Hi, Joe. Go ahead.
Yeah, Alan, great topic. I had taken a course, a Yale Open course online on environmental studies, and it spoke about the chemical industry and how basically only 100 out of 80,000 chemicals on market were ever tested for toxicity. So that's one thing. But I have two questions. One was, you being an athletic person, how much did you miss that during your illness, and how good did it feel to get back to that? And my second question is, just the environment in Florida, like how is it so insidious in such an idyllic place? And it seemed like that building was the oasis and the one safe spot. But, how does some place like so nice, like Florida, get so infiltrated with criminals?
Criminals or toxins? Which are you speaking about?
Both.
Okay. Well, the criminals, the mafia used to winter there every winter, and we used to track the mafia. We knew where they were going, what they were doing. It's a transient place. When people want to escape from their problems in the other parts of the country, they come to South Florida. It's fun and sun. It's very transient, so it attracts those kinds of people. But in terms of toxicity, South Florida is the hottest, most humid climate in the United States. So the uses of pesticides is off the charts in South Florida. Florida is rated the third most toxic state in the United States because you've got the humidity, the mold, the pesticides, the buildings that are all sealed up so they could protect their electric bills. They don't have to bring in the outside air and cool it because they're just recirculating the old air. So it's a pretty toxic place. But when you look at it from a veneer perspective, it's beautiful.
His other question, of course, is how does it feel to you to be more active again?
Well, let me just tell you this. I mean, I feel very blessed and very grateful that I've got this second chance to try and make a difference. And how does it feel? I mean, it feels like, you know what it feels like? When I got out of that bubble, it felt like Rip Van Winkle waking up from an 8-year coma and coming out into the world and seeing things that so much had changed in 8 years. The internet age passed me by.
Oh, my
I had
God.
No internet. I had no television. The styles had changed. The cars had changed. Everything had changed. I had to basically relearn and familiarize myself with the world that had passed me by. It felt amazing, like I had almost been reborn again.
And how much did your daughter contribute to this drive for you to want to live?
She was the total reason. You asked me earlier, George, you said, did suicide ever cross my mind? Every single day it did. But when I looked into that little girl's blue eyes, I thought, I'm all she's got. It's just me and
you
her.
have to make this work.
You got to make it work. And I fought back. And in the process of fighting back, I had opened up Pandora's box and discovered that I was just a tip of this huge iceberg. And that propelled me to try and help make a difference if I ever had a second chance again. And this is it.
Susan's in Roseville, California. Welcome to the show. Hi, Susan. Go ahead.
Hi. I was so excited when I heard what this subject was about because I suffered almost identical to your environmental illness.
There you go.
I got ill at about 16 when my life was just starting, and I was deathly ill. It just kept getting worse and worse, and I got so bad to where I was bedridden, sick all the time, infections, lost my balance, lost my hearing. I couldn't even hardly form words. I had migraine headaches. I, couldn't digest anything. I was malnutritioned. I was losing weight, losing my hair, night fevers, night sweats, you name it. And it was really quite a miracle. I was trying to go to doctors, but I was so sick. I couldn't even walk into the doctor's office. So, and then they would always tell me, what's the matter with you? You're a beautiful young girl. It's all in your head. We don't know what's causing all these illnesses. And then some of them thought I had cancer because I had cancer symptoms, but I didn't have cancer. But most of them just said it's all in my head. And, I would be getting strep throat, tonsillitis, swollen glands, my face was always puffy. My little brother would say, we need to tie a little string to Sue. She'd fly away like a balloon. I was so swelled up all the time. I had circulatory problems. I was allergic to everything under the sun. I had I'd go, if I felt like it was a little bit better of a day to get out of bed, I'd walk outside. Within 5 minutes, I'd grow like a yeast infection all over the outside of my chest. And it turned out that I not only had multiple chemical sensitivities, environmental illness, but I also had a bad case of systemic candida yeast infection.
Oh, my God. You had everything happening to you.
It was all related, and I couldn't digest anything. I mean, it was really bad. I had so young, and you name it, I had it wrong with me. And I literally had to relearn everything again. I had to relearn how to, because I did drive. Just, slowly it got worse.
And where do you stand today, Susan, with the illness?
I am like your guest. I look completely healthy. In fact, I look healthier than most healthy people. I got all my hair back. I'm super looking healthy, but I live a very restricted life, just like he does.
And you're aware of everything now, aren't you?
Oh my God! I try to help people too, but people just don't really believe me.
Alan, let me ask you this too, and thank you for that. I appreciate that, Susan. When you go into a store or a building, are you cognizant of the environment?
That's a great question. I could tell you've been interviewing for a while, George. Yes, absolutely. I can go into, actually, when you were asking, are there places that you could hire to see if there's anything wrong in somebody's environment, people have taken me into their places because they couldn't figure out what it is. And I can go in there, and usually I sense everything, almost everything. I could tell you if there's mold in the house, I sense it. I could tell you if there's formaldehyde, I could sense it. I could tell you if there's, all kinds of different things. I sense it. And you might ask me, well, how can I sense, paint from carpeting, from mold to this to that? Because I develop a different set of symptoms depending on what I'm.
You trained yourself.
Exactly.
And do you get out of there quickly?
Well, if it's a courtroom, I don't, right? If it's a television studio, I don't. But I always go back to my safe place, my safe house.
Yeah.
I don't stay in hotels. I don't, drive around in new cars, rental cars. I'm very guarded in what I do and how I do it.
Just an amazing story. It really is. Next up, let's go to Rob in Vancouver, Canada, on the international line. Hey, Rob, go ahead, sir.
Hi, thanks very much for having me on, and wonderful information tonight. I'm wondering if I would like to make a comment, 2 quick comments, and maybe you can comment on them.
Sure.
Here in Canada, my understanding, in Vancouver, I live in Vancouver and Toronto, and I've worked in high-rise office towers for the last 20 years. Particularly in Vancouver, there are a few towers that have become notoriously known as sick buildings. And my understanding over the years in talking to people who are engineers and city planners is that somewhere around, I want to say the 80s, at least here in Canada, builders were incentivized to make buildings non-smoking. And the incentive given to them was to allow them to cut the HVAC capacity by 50%. So decrease the airflow in the building by 50%. So obviously saves hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you get less fresh air circulating. And then the other dilemma I think we're having up here is builders are incentivized to use what is considered environmentally friendly products, but that's from a material standpoint. And there is no consideration given to the chemicals that are used to process that material. Quickly, like, for example, I know there's some woods here that are used by builders where, you can't burn the scrap wood because the ash becomes so laden with chemicals that it's like so incredibly toxic to the environment. So I don't know, maybe if you've come across this, know a bit about it, or maybe comment on that.
Well, Rob, thank you for your call. It's a good question. I could tell you that there's a certification called LEEDS, LEEDS. And if a building is certified LEEDS, that means it's environmentally safe. That means there's adequate ventilation, It means that it's built with materials that are not outgassing toxic chemicals. So I would advise you or any of the listeners out there, if you go into an office building, ask the management, ask the owners of the building, is this LEED certified? Because more and more of those buildings are popping up, which is it's a very good thing.
Would they even know, Alan, the building people?
Well, the management company should know.
They should,
because it's and the owners would certainly know, because it's it costs more to build it that way, or convert it. You could take an existing structure and convert it to LEED certified. It would cost some money to do it, but it would be safe. I could walk into a building right away and I could tell you if the air is safe or not.
Yeah. Now, if you go get a little radon detector and you find out that your house has this problem, what do you do about it?
Okay. With radon specifically, what you do is you first go to the ground floor of the structure and see if there's any cracks in the ground floor, and then seal the cracks, because that's how it comes in.
Aha.
It comes in through the ground.
Through the ground.
It doesn't come in through the windows. It doesn't come in through the ceiling. It's through the ground. So you could identify where the source is, fix it, and your problem is gone.
Is there radon coming in from the ground everywhere, or just in certain regions of the country?
It's another good question, and the answer is there are hot spots in this country where there's more radon than others. And one of the guides in my book, it will tell you, it will show you in what areas of the country are hot and where they're not hot. There's a lot in the Northeast, and it's just naturally occurring. Man is not doing this. It's just the way it is. But
nature.
Yeah, in my book, you can go to this guide, and it will show you in what areas of the country there's radon gas. And then you could order this test kit and do it yourself. Send it in, and you'll see whether or not you got radon gas in your house.
Alan, do keep in touch with us, will you?
I will, certainly.
Thank you. Alan Bell, the name of the book, Poisoned. What a gracious, unbelievable story.